Let's flash back to April 25th, 2019. Persona fans are eagerly awaiting the reveal of a new game that has been teased under the name Persona 5S. Many people believe that this was certainly a port of Persona 5 to Switch, considering Joker had been added to Smash only a few days before. Others thought this might be a new fighting game in the vein of Persona 4 Arena. Many people were surprised to find that this new game was revealed to be a Persona game in the style of Dynasty Warriors. The reaction from the Persona fandom that day was not necessarily hype. Most people were just confused, if not casually excited. As for me, I was excited, but a bit hesitant. Not because the idea of a Persona Musou crossover game sounded like a bad idea, but I find that most Persona spin-offs are lacking in several ways compared to their main series counterparts. Sure, the stories are often entertaining, but the gameplay almost always leaves something to be desired. Despite all these spin-off games carrying the Persona name, they always lack most of the special ingredients that make a Persona game a Persona game. So I wasn't quite confident that a Persona 5 Musou game could have the same effect as something like Hyrule Warriors, especially as Atlus was trying to sell the game as a direct sequel to Persona 5. Despite all my doubts, however, Atlus and Koei Tecmo delivered. The gameplay might not be the same turn-based combat as the original Persona 5, but the new action-oriented system feels just as polished and just as deep, and does a near-perfect job of translating the traditional Persona battle system into an action setting. Now, if you happen to be on the fence about this game like I was, or you don't believe that you will enjoy a Persona game in the Musou style, let me explain why I think this combat system is so great, along with some of my tips from the 60 or so hours it took me to 100% this game. Without further ado, it's showtime! Let's start by outlining what exactly a Musou game is. A Musou game, or Warriors game if you like using regular words, is a type of hack-and-slash action game that focuses on taking down hundreds of enemies that all go down in no more than a few hits. These games are basically one big power fantasy as you watch your KO count go from the hundreds to the thousands. This type of game originates from the Dynasty Warriors franchise, but many other franchises have gotten Musou games of their own, like Legend of Zelda, Fire Emblem, Dragon Quest, and One Piece. Most of these games follow the same general formula. You play as a single character that is set in a large, semi-open map as you make your way through the enemies in front of you in order to take over keeps that will raise your size morale. Every game tends to have its own unique mechanic, but all of these games have this structure at its core. While this gameplay loop can be extremely satisfying and lots of fun, many criticize these games for being repetitive and brain-dead, and these aren't exactly unwarranted criticisms. It's not a genre game that clicks with everyone. With all that in mind, let's look at Persona 5 Strikers and see how it compares to what we know about Musou games. Within the first couple minutes of the game, Strikers starts you in a setting that is familiar to anyone who has played one of these games before. A semi-open setting with weak enemies as far as the eye can see, and you control Joker on his own with none of his party members in sight. You defeat the enemies in front of you as more spawn in, seemingly endlessly. If you were someone coming into this game expecting something different than a typical Warriors game, this might be setting off some red flags already. However, let me assure you that this game's opening is incredibly deceiving. The gameplay seen throughout the rest of this game goes against what you are shown here in many ways. In fact, I would argue that Strikers is the least traditional Musou game I've ever played. Let's get into why that is. First off, I want to point out that Strikers does not feature the KO count that is a trademark of most Warriors games. I believe this is because the focus of this game is much less about taking down as many enemies as you can, but rather the game takes an approach similar to an RPG, where enemies are simply an obstacle you must face in order to progress forward. There are two types of encounters that you will face in this game. A more standard encounter that I will call a Horde encounter, and an encounter against a stronger enemy that I will call a unique monster encounter because Xenoblade is forever tainted in my brain. So, these Horde encounters are the closest that you'll get to the standard Warriors formula. When a battle starts, a group of no more than 30 or so enemies will pop up, and you are tasked with defeating them all before moving on. Most of these enemies are the typical Warriors affair. They will never take more than like 10 hits to go down, which is the number of hits the bokoblins from Hyrule Warriors wish they could withstand. Considering you have to defeat them all, one or two enemies can easily go unnoticed. No worries though, you can click on the right stick at any time to target an enemy. This is incredibly useful for finding any enemies that have slipped through the cracks. On the other hand, the unique monster fights work slightly differently. They are most akin to the stronger enemies from other Warriors games. These fights center around one especially strong enemy, or boss, that needs to be taken down in order to complete the encounter. These enemies will sometimes summon smaller enemies, but they don't need to be defeated, they just disappear when the main enemy is taken care of. These types of combat are the bread and butter of Persona 5 Strikers. I'll go into more detail on them later. For now, let's take a broader look at the gameplay and what weaves these battles together. Much like in the original Persona 5, you'll be exploring palaces in order to... Hold on, I have a call thing. Hello? Why hello there, Mr. Atlas. What a coincidence. I was just talking about your game. What do you mean they're called jails and not palaces? They're quite literally the same thing. Alright, if you say so. Sorry, I've been told that we must refer to these palaces as jails for the sake of branding? Anyways, you explore these jails, which have a very similar structure to the dungeons you explore in Persona 5. In some aspects, the jails feel less fleshed out. They lack the recurring puzzles that showed up in palaces, but fans of palaces will still find a lot to love. The Phantom Thieves maintain a lot of the same exploration abilities from the previous adventure. You can use Third Eye to find secrets, hide behind cover and other objects, and attack oblivious enemies with an ambush to gain the upper hand in battle. Just like this game seamlessly transitions from exploration into battle, I will also seamlessly transition from one topic into another. Nice! Battles in this game take place right where you initiated contact with the enemy, meaning the dungeon you explore and the arena where you fight is one and the same. This means no more teleporting to a separate room that is much more spacious than the room you were just in. How did they do that anyways? This means you have full control of your active character at all times. You can move and dash around to dodge any attack that comes your way, but be warned, some attacks are rather tough to dodge. Mobility is always a strength of action RPGs. There's never a dull moment in combat, and you'll always be involved in the action. Keep your reaction skills honed, and you can take a lot less damage than you would otherwise. The combat basics are standard affair for any Musou game. You use Y and X to perform your regular and strong attacks. Assuming you're using a normal controller, get out of here with your symbols, PlayStation. You can use a string of normal attacks followed by a strong attack to perform a combo. These are especially important in Strikers because this is a way to perform Persona abilities or use elemental attacks without using SP. Yep, SP is back, and it's just as easy to waste it all as ever. Unlike other Persona games though, you actually have an alternative this time. Using combos, you can target enemy weaknesses, although these attacks are weaker than their SP counterparts. Each character has a different combo that they can perform, which is common for Musou games, but is still a welcome change for characters who all originated in the same turn-based combat system. Joker has his own special gimmick, like any good Persona MC usually does. His ability to use any Persona returns, and it is especially important in Strikers because each Persona produces a different ability at the end of combos. Each Persona will be able to use an ability that correlates to the elemental symbol that shows up next to their name, or use a buff or healing skill if it shows that symbol. This can lead to a lot of creativity in how you execute your combos with Joker, so always make sure to experiment when you get a new Persona. Combo attacks are always a good start, but if you want to do some real damage, you have to use your SP-based Persona skills. By pressing and holding the Summon Persona button, you'll slow down time to a crawl, and you'll be able to select which attack you want to use. This is very similar to how you selected ATB attacks in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think the system is a genius way to incorporate the feeling of a turn-based combat system into an action game, and I would love to see this style of combat used more in the future. The attacks your Personas can use are all pulled directly from Persona 5, and they are all translated super well into an action setting. You have your standard elemental skills, which work exactly as you would expect, as well as your buff, debuff, and healing skills. Skills starting with MA can hit a much larger range of enemies than the standard version, and physical attacks have all sorts of varying areas that determine which foes will hit. The game could have worked with just your basic set of combos to perform your attacks. Most Warriors games get by with those alone, but having the ability to stop time, plan out your next move, and unleash powerful attacks really gives this game an identity of its own. Be careful not to spam these moves, however. SP does not recover over time, and it can run out very quickly, especially in the early game, so be careful not to waste it all. Having a limited resource like this is relatively new for the Musou genre. It helps the game feel less mindless, since spamming moves won't help you in the long run. While it's tempting to just solo the whole game with Joker and his wildcard ability, it is smart to conserve his SP and hit elemental weaknesses with the other 3 weirdos that are tagging along with you. Your party consists of 4 Phantom Thieves that can be used in battle, with Joker being required at all times. Outside of battle, you can freely swap in and out party members, a feature that was new to Persona 5 that I'm grateful to see return. When in battle, there will be a party member assigned each direction of the D-pad, and you can instantly swap to them at any time. Which party member you want to use is going to depend on the weaknesses and resistances of the enemy that you're fighting. Don't feel like you have to manage everyone in your party at one time though. The party member AI in this game is rather smart. It will dodge attacks and help give you buffs and healing, yet they don't completely exhaust the entire supply of SP. Just play who you want to play and let the AI handle the rest of the party. Each character plays differently, and many characters have ways of incorporating elemental damage into their regular attacks. Of course, each character has their combos as well, which gives every character a way to use their element of choice. Aside from having access to a character's unique combos, the game actually has a system that incentivizes playing as each character called the Master Arts. These Master Arts are skills that are progressively unlocked as you spend more time playing with the character. Even though these skills are unlocked fairly quickly, it still feels like it spices up each character's moveset slightly and encourages you to play as everyone. Let's go back to those unique monster type encounters I was talking about before. The sole focus of these battles is taking down one powerful enemy that appears when the battle starts. You'll notice that its health bar is shown at all times at the top of the screen, with another section below it containing 2 or more shield icons. These actually correspond to elemental weaknesses. You must break all the shields in order to down the enemy. Downing an enemy works a little differently than in the Persona RPGs. Rather than an enemy going down when being hit with a weakness, instead you have to break the shields with weaknesses or critical hits in order to down the enemy. In fact, every enemy in the game has their own shields. The basic enemies in the game just usually have one, and it's barely visible. No matter whether it's a small minion or a big boss, as soon as you break all the shields, you can perform an all-out attack for major damage. Breaking shields also gives an additional perk. If you break a shield, but there is still at least one other shield remaining, you will stun the enemy momentarily and instead perform a one more attack, either dealing powerful melee attack yourself, or using the prompt that shows up to switch to a teammate and have them execute the attack instead. While the team at Koei Tecmo had to take some creative liberties, this system is a perfect translation of the intricacies of the Persona combat, hitting elemental weaknesses to down the enemy, performing a one more attack, and executing an all-out attack when enough damage has been done. This was the best way they could pull it off, and between this and your staple Persona abilities, this game truly feels like a Persona game, even within a completely different genre. I've covered most of what I want to cover about this game, but there are still a few miscellaneous things that I wanted to address. First of all, the item menu can be open at any time. This completely pauses the action, and you can spam as many healing items as you want in order to keep your team in tip-top shape. This drastically changes the way you use items as opposed to a traditional RPG. Now you don't feel like you are wasting a turn if you use a 10 HP restoring item, because now you can just use 10 of them without losing any time in the game at all. I personally found myself using items a lot more than in a game like the base Persona 5, because they were the easiest and most cost-effective way of having access to healing. The easier it is to use items, the more willing a player is to use them. Secondly, there are a couple of extra options that you have in battle that give you more opportunities to deal damage. There are many objects in jails that you can jump to that give you a place to ambush enemies from. These objects can also be used in battle to perform special attacks that will deal large areas of damage to enemies. Sometimes you deal physical damage, sometimes elemental damage. You can't really do heal damage though. Always keep an eye out for these and remember that you can always jump to them if you need to get out of a crowded situation. You can also use special attacks called Showtime attacks. These are similar to the powerful special attacks you can use in Warriors games, although Showtime attacks charge up slower than the traditional Warriors alternative. You can use them to wipe out a group of small enemies, or deal a decent amount of damage to a boss. They play a cool cutscene as well. I would say these replace the all-out attack splash screen from Persona 5, as there's nothing else that really does something similar. Next, I wanted to touch on the Velvet Room and how it works in this game. Persona Fusion is back, although it has been extremely streamlined. You can only choose certain recipes to create personas, rather than having free reign to mix and match. This can feel strange for those of you who have played Persona 5, but it's easy enough to adjust to. Aside from that, you can still carry over whatever skills you like during Fusion, although the lack of bonus EXP from social links is definitely noticeable. The other major change is how personas are strengthened. Rather than sacrificing a persona to power up another, you now power up your personas using PP. Okay, laugh it up. It's not that funny. Okay, maybe it is a little funny. These PP, or persona points, can be used to level up a persona or increase their stats. A word from the wise here: if you at all intend on fusing some of the stronger personas unlockable at higher levels, do not use these points at all until the end game. They will be essential in obtaining these personas, due to the way that some low-level personas need to be leveled up. Besides, you will rotate through your persona stock frequently enough that any persona you buff up will become irrelevant before you know it. Use it if you need a skill for fusion or something, but outside of that, there's no harm in sitting on your PP. Okay, that's kind of funny. Lastly, I wanted to highlight some of this game's excellent boss fights. All of the things that apply to the unique monster fights apply to bosses as well, with the addition of a heck ton of extra HP points and shields. Many bosses will use the same attacks that both you and your enemies use, but they all attack in unique ways. Even if a move was used by someone else, each boss will execute that move in a unique way. Dodging in these fights is especially important, so take the time to learn the patterns of these moves, as you will take a lot of damage if you are hit by them. These bosses can be tough, but it's definitely a good kind of tough. Make sure to take advantage of the stunning effect from breaking shields, as this can interrupt whatever strong attack the boss was about to hit you with. Alongside expertly designed arenas and great shadow designs that feel right out of Persona 5, you're in for a good time. So, that's everything there is to say about the gameplay of Persona 5 Strikers. It is a meticulously crafted game that I believe will appeal to any Persona 5 fan. This game is a love letter to the original Persona 5, and respects so much of what made the original great. I also had a lot of fun putting together this video, and I'm glad I was able to gush about this game that really came out of nowhere and surprised me in a way that hopefully can get other people excited about this game. So, if you haven't given it a try yet, this game has my full recommendation. And if you have played it, I would love to hear some of your thoughts in the comments below. And if you somehow haven't played Persona 5, but you still watch this video and the game sounds interesting, well, let that serve as motivation to play Persona 5 even faster. Now, I have here in my notes that I'm supposed to end the video with the show's over screen that pops up when you do a Showtime attack, but, you know, writing jokes is hard. So I'm just going to tell you to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Then I'm just going to stick that screen right there. There we go. Get it? Show's over.